Hey everyone, it's the Kitchen Table Magician, and tonight we're going to talk about, I want to share with you one of my oldest deck builds. This dates all the way back to Mirage and Ice Age era, and this is the first deck that I built around what I like to call kind of an obscure rare that has to have a deck built specifically around it in order for it to do anything, and that rare is Polymorph, and it's from Mirage. And it's a sorcery that reads bury target creature. That creature's controller reveals cards from the top of his or her library until they reveal a creature card, and then put that creature into play under their control as what were just played. When you're done doing that, then you reshuffle all the revealed cards back into your library. So before we tear the deck apart and show you what's in here, because it has evolved over the years, a little bit of history on why I built it and what I was actually trying to play with. Ice Age came out with what at the time was the largest creature in the game, in the form of Polar Kraken, that had a formidable casting cost and an upkeep that was insane. But still, I always wanted to play with it because I just love really big beat stick types of creatures. But until Polymorph came along, I really had no way to really play with this. But I do have a pair of them. These are the original pair that I got in booster packs. I never did get rid of them, although they're kind of sitting in a shelf collecting dust right now. But I just keep them around for nostalgic reasons. And so basically what you have to do is figure out a way to sacrifice a creature and reveal Polar Kraken every time that you want to reveal to cast Polymorph. So you can't have any other creatures in the deck. You want to hit Polar Kraken every time. So to do this, Alliances had a white instant in the form of Errand of Duty. So I had 4 of these in the deck as well. And this is an instant that reads, put a night token into play. Treat this as a 1/1 white creature with banding. So this is how I got around having other creatures in the deck to sacrifice. I created them with Errand of Duty. So you would polymorph by sacrificing one of your knights, and then you would hit a Polar Kraken every time. And back in Ice Age Mirage, this was a viable strategy, and it won a lot and was a lot of fun to play with because there just wasn't much to deal with something that large and in charge. However, times have changed, and there are better targets now for Polymorph and more ways to create tokens. So I'm going to break this deck down a little bit for you and see so you can see what's in it today. So this is a blue-white control deck. So for the mana base, it's all dual lands, islands, plains, but I'll show you some of the splashier stuff. Sajuri Refuge, dual land. I have a pair of Celestial Colonnades, and I like these because in a pinch for 5 later in the game, if you need a body to sacrifice, you can turn this into a 4/4 white and blue elemental creature with flying. Also, later in the game, that's a pretty big stat. If you haven't been able to finish the game yet, you could finish it with these as well. So I do have 2 of them. I have 4 Flooded Strands to go fetch for the lands that I need. These are kind of funky with the gold border. They came from, my wife bought them for me. They came from, 2004 Worlds. This was a pre-made set of 4 decks that Wizards released. They did this for several years. After World Championships, they would release the top 4 decks and you could buy them. But they had these funky back. So I have all 4 of those from that year. I have since pirated cards out of 3 of them. I left 1 completely intact because I really liked it. But these Flooded Strands came from one of them. And again, casual magic. We play with what we have here, and I have these, and so I play with them. There is a Mishra's Factory in here. This is a new one from Eternal Masters. I used to run 4 of the older ones, but I have since moved them to another deck. But Mishra's Factory, again, for 1 mana, turns itself into a creature, and you can sacrifice that into Polymorph. Another man land, the Fairy Conclave. This is from Urza's block. Turns into a creature. You can sacrifice it and go Polymorph. And then, this was also from Alliances. I had this in the original build as well. You can sacrifice plains. When it comes into play, you have to sacrifice a plains. But then, for 2 mana and tapping it, you can put a soldier token into play. It's a 1/1 white creature. So this was another thing that was in the original build and is still in the build today. Other than that, it's just basic lands. 4 islands and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8 planes. It looks like I went heavy on the planes because I wanted to make sure I had one when I had Kildorian Outpost. So I went a little heavier on the planes. So that's the mana base. So of course the centerpiece of the deck is still Polymorph. So 4 copies of that, 2 of the original Mirage ones, and then some M10. It got an M10 reprint, so I found a few of those to swap out. And the token spell now is Raise the Alarm because you get twice the value for the same cost. You get 2 tokens instead of 1 for the same cost as Errand of Duty. So in instant speed, put 2 1/1 soldier creatures into play. So that, with some of the man lands, I usually have something that I can sacrifice. So the targets have gotten bigger and better. Progenitus is in here to go get. Darksteel Colossus is a hit. 11 Trample Indestructible. This is the Progenitus is 10/10 protection from everything. So these are very hard to deal with. I have It That Betrays. This is an Eldrazi with Annihilator 2. It's 11/11, and whenever an opponent sacrifices a non-token permanent, you get to put it into the battlefield under your control. So they have to annihilate a couple of their permanents when you swing, and then you get to put those on your side of the table. So that's pretty awesome. And then the Mac Daddy here, I do have Emrakul, the Aeon's Torn, in here. This is pretty much instant win if your opponent cannot deal with this. So those are the 4 targets I have for Polymorph. Every time I Polymorph, I'm going to hit one of these 4 creatures. Outside of that, it's a blue-white control deck. So to that end, you run your full play set of counter spells, and you run a lot of board sweep. I have a balance in here because whenever I do this, I'm usually only going to have 1 or no creatures on the table. So even just getting them down to 1 creature, the one that I have is going to be Emrakul or Progenitus or something like that to whatever it is they have. Outside of that, I have some Supreme Verdicts. I have a pair of those. Destroy all creatures. Supreme Verdict can't be countered. Wrath of Gods. These, I think, came out of the same deck as those dual fetch lands. 4 of those. And 3 Day of Judgment. So I have like 8, looks like 10 pieces of just basically complete board sweep in here, because that's what you want to do. You want to keep the board clean except for the one big beat stick that you're running around with. So ideally you Wrath, then you rally the troops, or whatever that white card was called, Raise the Alarm, and then you if you do it right, you can Raise the Alarm and do Polymorph the turn after you do Wrath or Day of Judgment or something along those lines, and just be left with a beat stick. Outside of that, I have a couple of Planeswalkers. I have Gideon because, again, he can just turn himself into a body and you can sacrifice it, and he's not a creature, and you can sacrifice that to Polymorph if you have to. And I have Elspeth, who for +1 puts a creature token on the table that you can sacrifice. So the idea is when you draw a Polymorph or get into Polymorph, you've got something to feed it. So these fit that build well as well. Outside of that, I have some card draw in the form of 4 accumulated knowledges, and I have 2 mystical tutors, which will let me go fetch Polymorph or Raise the Alarm, which are the two halves of my combo. I can get either one of those with a mystical tutor. And then for the last part of the deck, I just rounded off with a couple of pieces of spot removal. I have an Oblivion Ring, which is the enchantment that gets rid of anything. And I have Dismantling Blow, which is an upgraded version of Disenchant. Destroy an artifact or enchantment. It has a kicker. If you pay that, you can draw a couple of cards. And then a little bit of mana ramp. This deck doesn't need much because Polymorph is only 4. In the form of Azorius Signet, so a pair of those just for an extra little bit of mana ramp. And that's the deck, and I have a lot of fun with this. It wins a lot. Again, this is casual Magic, so it's one of my oldest and favorite decks, and that's how it has evolved over the years from Polar Krakens and Errand of Duties into what it is today. So thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed this build.